Joining me now is Brandi Crawford Johnson. We spoke a few weeks ago, and I've been kind of swamped with other things, but I wanted to have you on. A lot of people focus on the water, and I have focused on the water all over this country. Obviously, we know Flint. We know other parts of Michigan have PFAS in the water, which are cancer-causing chemicals made from the process of manufacturing Teflon and other nonstick cookware. But air pollution, the mainstream media don't really seem to care about that. But it could equally make people sick. And there is a plant in Michigan, in Kalamazoo, that has been getting away with releasing toxic chemicals into the air that is making people sick. From what I could tell, the state of Michigan Environmental Department, which I have a history with because they helped cover up the Flint water crisis and the toxic water. From what I could tell, the state of Michigan Environmental Department, which has a new name, but pretty much the same MO, has helped cover this up. Let's start from the beginning. Explain to the audience, what is this plant? Who is this plant? What were they making? And what are the chemicals and toxins that have been released?
So the plant is a paper mill called Graphic Packaging International. They are in the top 50 toxic air and water polluters in the nation. And they have just completed an expansion in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is going to increase greenhouse emissions by about 220%. They release every toxic chemical that you can think of, hydrogen sulfide, methyl mercaptan, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. There's like 30 different ones at least. And this is kind of like a cover up too. I call it the Kalamazoo air crisis, like the Flint water crisis. There is a fence line community located next door that I lived in for 8 years. And I developed asthma as a result of the toxic gas leaks that Graphic Packaging refused to put any pollution prevention in place. They were never regulated properly by Eagle or the EPA. And they've never had any enforcement. They've had like 10 penalty written violation notices since 2010. And they've never got one penalty for it. And it's kind of like Eagle encourages the pollution to continue. They give permits to polluters next to fence line communities without doing any health impact studies, which is totally immoral. And, they even give money towards these projects. Eagle's given $3 million.
I just want the audience to know, Eagle is basically the state of Michigan's.
Yeah, it's the state of Michigan.
Yeah, every state has their own environmental department.
Right. They're the state version of the EPA, I guess you want to call it. And they changed their name after the Flint water crisis, thinking that was going to make people like forget or something. But really, they are doing the same things that they did in Flint. They cover things up. They allow the bad guys to get away with murder. We have a 14-year death gap in our neighborhood because of these toxic gas releases, and Graphic Packaging has refused to fix anything. There's been engineers that have come out from the city of Kalamazoo saying, put a cap on your wastewater clarifier, and Graphic Packaging says, no, I'm not going to.
Right.
They have $600 million for an expansion, but they don't have $500,000 to fix all the leaks that the engineers were told them to fix. And to me, it seems like they know that they're going to get away with whatever they want to get away with, because Eagle never enforces any of the regulations that they violate. And, they even started their expansion without an air permit, and Eagle just sent them another written violation notice, never gave them a penalty. And it's like, they knew that they were going to get away with it. That's why they just started expansion without an air permit, because they know Eagle let them do whatever they want. And it's just sad because the neighborhood is suffering extreme respiratory disease, cancer. The employees, I hired a toxicologist that said there was a severe health risk to the employees of the plant and the residents nearby. And it's just sad. And it's been a huge battle. There's corruption with the city of, politicians, the state politicians. Graphic Packaging donates to one of our politicians, Fred Upton, to his campaign. And the rest of the politicians, they've ignored me. They've ignored other residents. you know, we have a lot of local coverage that's consistently being reported on what's going on there. And we have a health study coming out in a couple of weeks from the state that I begged them to do for like 2 years. And they've delayed that too. And they're going by some of the air monitoring that was done by the city, but the city has a wastewater plant next door to Graphic Packaging. So we don't trust the city monitoring either because they're liable. And they also didn't fix their equipment for a long time. They had a study done in 2009 where they showed like all these gas leaks. These toxic gas leaks were 5 times the minimal risk level, but they never told anyone in the city about it. So they just kept saying, oh, it's an odor problem. They had doctors with the hospital up the hill filing complaints, residents, because there's a hospital, you can smell the toxic gas in the hospital. And they just ignored it and they just pretended like it was just an odor issue instead of saying, hey, we know what the odor is. It's toxic gas and it's leaking out of the wastewater plant in the paper mill.
I just want to show the audience. So this is, Colin, if you have the F rating, this is from Ozone. If you live in Kalamazoo County, the air you breathe may put your health at risk, with an F rating from Ozone. Then you look at, this is from 2017, so God knows what it is now. The leading causes of death in Kalamazoo County. You have heart disease is the leader, a little under the Michigan average. Cancer is pretty close to the Michigan average. Look what's above the Michigan average and well above the U.S. average. Chronic lower respiratory diseases at 48%. So, yeah. It's no wonder that that's 7 points higher than the U.S. average. The other thing people should know, if you don't know this, you're not just dealing with like an environmental department that's like other environmental departments just doing the bidding of big business. You're dealing with an environmental department that, in my view, is criminal. If you go back to the Flint water cover-up, and that's what it was. Literally, the head of the drinking water office in Michigan, Leanne Schechter Smith. For those of you in Michigan, for those of you in Flint, you know what I'm talking about. The head of the drinking water office in October of 2014, when epidemiologists in Michigan were sounding the alarm, there's a massive Legionnaires outbreak here. Legionnaires is a waterborne disease. It kills people. It's waterborne bacteria. The epidemiologists were waving the flag. Hey, we need to notify the public here. We need to do something. And the head of the drinking water office called the Department of Health and stopped them from going public. Stop them from going public. Literally 16 months before the people of Flint were notified of the Legionnaires outbreak. They already knew about it 16 months earlier.
Oh, they know about everything ahead of time. And they don't, just like the Benton Harbor, there's another lead water crisis in Benton Harbor, and they knew about it for 3 years and never did anything. Just like, you know, they knew about this for 12 years and never did anything, maybe even before that. I mean, these people that are the heads of the departments, like of air quality and water quality at Eagle, they've been there 30 years at least. So they're the ones that have to go. You know, maybe not all these employees that have come on. I doubt that some of them I've talked to, they all know who I am, every department there, because there's issues in every department that I don't just complain about air quality, I complain about the PCB contamination in our neighborhood and that Graphic Packaging is a responsible party for along the river. I complain about, you know, water quality issues with PFAS. I was on the Eagles PFAS advisory board and I quit because they knew where all the PFAS were located in all of the landfills in Michigan. And I asked them to release it to the public and they refused. And so I said, well, if you're not going to do anything to try to solve the PFAS crisis and let the public know, there's families that live next to these landfills. They deserve to know if there's high levels of PFAS there. And it's just like, it's the same thing with the Kalamazoo Environmental Concerns Committee. When I joined that, I told them about that F rating. I told them, you know, this is the American Lung Association report. There's reporters saying we have the dirtiest air quality in the nation. So what are you guys going to do about it? Well, what they did about it is they sent cease and desist letters to all the journalists saying, don't report our air quality, it will ruin our reputation. So that shows the city of Kalamazoo, they don't care about the people and their health. They care about their reputation. They care about, you know, their political goals. And it's just really sad. But the problem is that the world is not woke to all of this. And I'm trying to like wake people up. And the best way to do that is through journalism. You know, that's the only way. And I mean, you can say I've had posts taken down on Facebook trying to say stuff too. And I'm just like, hold on, is Facebook in with this corporation? I mean, I know this corporation is a big Fortune 500 company, but I don't know how they can get away with this.
all these corporations are donating to local politicians, to state politicians, federal politicians. A lot of these companies produce, you know, in some cases are one of the biggest employers in a lot of these areas. So they're allowed to get away with literally bloody murder due to, you know, economic reasons. By the way, to those of you in the audience right now saying, Jordan, same thing's happening here. Why are you spotlighting this? Well, I can't cover every single story, but yeah, this kind of stuff is happening everywhere. And it's not just paper mills. You got uranium mining, other types of mines. Obviously, we know what's been going on in West Virginia with the coal mines and the corruption there. A lot of this is happening in poorer communities. A lot of this is happening on the backs of Black and brown people. And I know there was a civil rights complaint when it comes to this specific story.
Yeah, so I filed one with the city because this is a predominantly African-American community, fence line community, environmental racism all across the board here. I filed one against Eagle with EPA, ECRCO. And I filed one, and then soon after I filed one, I think Earth Justice filed one for Flint, and then there was one filed for Detroit. So there's, you know, several complaints filed for the permits given to these polluters next to fence line communities that are predominantly African-American have already faced, you know, years of, you know, frontline pollution. I mean, there's another thing that just is not being talked about is the COVID rate in the neighborhood is horrible too. There's people so young dying from COVID that, you know, had asthma, like a young guy, like 20 years old, died yesterday. Another person on life support, 30, a 17-year-old died a few years ago. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, if you look at that death rate for African-American, like that's where the neighborhood is all the African-Americans predominantly live in that area. And you look at those death rates on that county sheet that you just showed, and look at the difference between white and Black, you see it's double. Like, I mean, there's like 1,500 children under the age of 1 that died. That's crazy. We only have like 8,000 people in the neighborhood. So 1,500 people are dying every day. They're just under 1 year old. Like, come on. But the toxicologist says that we live in a valley. So the gases get trapped. So it's worse. And, you know, so it's just like a toxic gas cloud. It's like everyone's just being gassed pretty much. You know, a lot of people compare it to Hitler putting people in vans and gassing them to death, you know, but I feel like, you know, just for them to expand during a climate crisis to increase all of these emissions by so much. I mean, they already released 700,000 tons, and they also lied. To their green bond investors for this expansion because they're considered a recycling cardboard plant or whatever now. They got $100 million in green bonds, and they never told any of the investors that they were being investigated for, you know, environmental racism, and that there was civil rights complaints, and that they had a class action lawsuit against them for gassing everyone for all these years. And so it's like, I don't see how they get away with this stuff.
Well, I'll also point out, not to trigger, you know, people on COVID, because everyone's got their opinion. I'm pro-vaccine and all that. But Omicron, in particular, the Omicron variant, and now there's like a sub-Omicron variant spreading in Europe, and cases are way up in England, and hospitalizations are up. I know in America, there's the COVID is over crowd and shut the fuck up. Unfortunately, it's not over. But Omicron in particular, they were finding that it affected children significantly because it got into their upper airway, whereas other strands were more effective to the lower airway. So when you have such a high respiratory death rate, and you have kids with asthma and inhaling this gas. I mean, I remember when I was in St. Louis a couple of years ago, I was covering, there was basically nuclear waste stored, and it basically was leaking. And there were children wearing masks there, and I smelled the gas, and I was just reporting for a few days. They lived there. So it's making even children and adults more susceptible to COVID. And in this case, like you said, majority African Americans.
Well, Harvard and Stanford both did a study that said that severe COVID cases are increased by, the deaths from severe COVID are increased by 15% if you live in a polluted area.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of studies out, I know, but I don't know what to do. I've literally been begging to save everyone's lives for like so long, just to see. They won't even come down there. The governor, she's visited the city so many times, and she's a Democratic governor, and she won't even come down to the neighborhood and go door to door like I did, because I was getting burning eyes at one of the houses, because I've owned several houses in this neighborhood, and I just started getting burning eyes. And then after I started getting burning eyes, it was a new symptom. My asthma started getting worse. And so I started doing FOIA requests. And that's where I found all these toxic gas studies that the city had done. And I went door to door, and like everyone was pulling out like eye drops for their burning eyes and inhalers. And I was like, oh my God, it's every street. Like, are you serious? And even our mailman, Ryan, who didn't even live in the neighborhood, he was like, yeah, I get burning eyes, especially when it rains. Acid rain.
And by the way, Michigan's slogan under Snyder, I don't know what it is now, was pure Michigan. Pure Michigan.
Pure toxic Michigan.
Pure Michigan. And what's amazing to me, can you imagine, Brandi, right now, if a story came out that like a Russian city had been releasing gas into its, I mean, they don't have much in terms of minorities, but was releasing gas into its people, and they covered it up and did nothing for the people, we'd be calling it a war crime.
Right.
But here in America,
it's okay. That's what I don't understand. And it's like, I've even talked to EPA officials, like, you need to sue the EPA. I'm like, what? You guys work here, And they're just like, yeah, they've just been covering the stuff. They work together. They call each other partners, They're partners to protect the environment and the people. No, they're not. I mean, how are you protecting us if the air monitors in Michigan that monitor our air quality have the criteria pollutants turned off? You don't know how much lead is coming in the air. You don't know how much carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide and every criteria pollutant that is required by law to be regulated and tested in the air. Eagle has the monitors turned off for at least 5 out of 6 of them. And our air monitor is located in the middle of the fairgrounds.
Could you back up? You just said that the air quality monitors are turned off?
Yes, the EPA ones that the state oversees. And I'm sure it's happening. I read from a Reuters article that it was happening like in Pennsylvania and Ohio too. Like there was a chemical explosion, and it said it was the cleanest air day ever or something for the whole week, even though it was like a huge chemical explosion. So everyone just goes about their day, doing their normal life and everything, thinking, okay, well, this is being regulated. Everything's fine. I can trust the government to regulate my air and my water. No, you can't. And that's what I learned the hard way. And I don't want anybody else to. I want people to speak out and start investigating what's really going on where they live so that they can protect their children and their grandchildren, because this is crazy. Like, this is crazy that it's been hidden from us for so many years. And, my parents and my grandparents, they just look at, factories provide jobs, but they probably just didn't realize that they also provide pollution.
Right.
That if they're not regulated, I mean, every factory is going to have pollution, but if you're not going to have regulations, then it's going to be way worse, and it's going to cause all of these horrible diseases. And to me, it's just a scam. I feel like these, polluters should have had, here's a good example, medical marijuana facilities, they have to have like filters on their stacks so the marijuana odor doesn't get out. How come the factories don't have to? Like, I don't understand. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, this is crazy. The marijuana industry in Michigan is regulated so tight, but the pollution is not.
I'll tell you a quick story, and the audience too. This tells you everything you need to know. I've been to Flint, I don't know, I think 18 times. And one of the stories I did there was the state of Governor Snyder's right-hand man. If you look at it in like mafia terms, his like consigliere was offering payoffs to sick Flint residents. He was going around Flint basically trying to make deals with sick Flint residents to keep them quiet. And one of those residents was a couple, Adam and Christina Murphy. They're since divorced. So as part of like wooing them, they invited Adam and Christina to the state water lab where they do the testing. So Adam and Christina go to the water lab. For some reason, there's like an ex-U.S. Marine, next to them, which they found intimidating, with the state of Michigan environmental officials giving them a walking tour of the lab. So Adam and Christina, they look over and they see this machine, and they ask them, "Oh, what's this machine? It looks like a next level, like futuristic thing." And it was basically a machine that could test for every single chemical on the periodic element, on the periodic table. Heavy metals, could test for everything. And Adam and Christina said, "Oh, I've never seen like reports with all these things that this machine tests for." "Oh yeah, we don't use that machine because the EPA, the federal drinking water regulations don't require us to test for these other things." That's not just Michigan. They have the capability to test for all sorts of things beyond lead and copper, not only in the water, but in the soil, in the air. And they don't do it. I wonder why, because you can't find what you're not looking for.
Exactly.
And if you actually were looking for all these things, you're talking all over this country. I mean, possibly hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in remediation in terms of these plants, water pipe distribution, which, contrary to what Biden says, this infrastructure deal does not change all the lead pipes around the country. It puts a slight dent in it. But literally, at least the state of Michigan had the capability to test for everything in the water, and they just don't do it because they're not required to. And that's the other thing. A lot of people thought like, oh, the EPA just suddenly became corrupt under Trump. No, the EPA has basically been there to serve business interests and test for the bare minimum and basically put out fires and put Band-Aids on gaping environmental gunshot wounds, which you've been experiencing for years.
Yeah. And I don't understand why they don't bring help to the frontline communities like this. Like they have FEMA if there's like a hurricane, a tornado, to come and help these people get relocated and stuff like that. But they don't want to relocate anyone. But maybe it is because it costs too much money. But do people have to, do they deserve to suffer like that? I mean, you could have all these other plants, they've shut down. They could have moved somewhere else to like an industrial park or something, because literally there's like nothing besides a chain link fence that separates this neighborhood from these two plants.
Right.
So they don't deserve to die premature death for your profits. Like it does not make sense. And I will never, and I won't stop fighting for justice for everyone, because I'm the one that sees these people dying. I'm the one that sees all these children that have to miss school all the time because of asthma, or they are terrified. There was even an elementary school that started their own air quality group because they were wondering if the gas that they smell at school every day is going to make them die. And it's like, should 7-year-olds be worried about dying from gas in their school every day? No. I mean, this is something that should be talked about a lot. Like, it's completely ignored, and it's horrible. And I know Biden's gung-ho on environmental justice, but I still don't see any actions. I see like all of these, promises that environmental justice is at the forefront, and the EPA is going to do more, and they're going to really focus on fence line communities and bring in everything and bring in help for everyone. Really? Wasn't that last year that you said that?
Yeah, Biden's gung-ho a lot. Biden's verbally gung-ho on a lot of things. He's also gung-ho on now rising the Pentagon budget to nearly $800 billion. And guess what? The Pentagon is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. So environmental justice, yeah, he says a lot of things. And let's just point it out. This is a bipartisan thing. Whitmer is the governor. I mean, granted, she's been dealing with COVID and a lot of other things, but she's the governor. I could tell you from talking to people in Flint, she hasn't followed through on her promises to them, hasn't done a goddamn thing for Flint. She actually told Flint during the governor's campaign that she was going to reopen the shut down water stations that former Governor Snyder shut down. She never did that. The former mayor of Flint told me on the record, I went to Governor Whitmer saying, we desperately need more state funds for interior plumbing, residents' interior home plumbing. The governor said to her, the legislature has Flint fatigue. There's nothing I could do. So
Wow.
she hasn't lifted a finger to fight for Flint, and it doesn't sound like
She's not going to fight for us because it's, even the Michigan, she's all about the Economic Development Council, the Michigan Economic Development Council. And they gave graphic packaging like $89 million for the expansion.
$89 million?
Yes, of taxpayer and school funds. And so that's another reason why I feel like she hasn't toured the neighborhood. Like University of Michigan showed like this map in 2019, all the environmental justice hotspots in Michigan. It was like Flint, Saginaw, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, all the main cities, and she hasn't done anything. She's ignored all my calls, all my emails. I had one politician assistant reach out to me, Gary Peters' assistant, his name's Peter, but he hasn't done anything. And I just feel like, election year is coming up too. I mean, the election year is now. I mean, it's a few months, not very many months away. And if she's not going to do anything to protect, she's got this Michigan Healthy Climate Plan that I had to speak out on, saying about the air monitoring, the environmental justice, issues. And one of my friends was like the climate advisor for Eagle. And she didn't get any staff the whole 2 years. Governor Whitmer appointed her to the climate and energy of Eagle department. She begged for staff for 2 years and she didn't get it. So she had to quit. And so now they have a new advisor they put in December. And I said, how are you going to even implement any of this climate plan that you have if you don't have any staff? I said, I've looked on that. There's not even any job openings to hire anyone. And she hired this environmental justice advocate too. And both of these advocates that are in her department at Eagle, they practically bribed me not to file a civil rights complaint. They just kept asking me, what do you want? What do you want? We don't want you to file a civil rights complaint at a Zoom meeting. And I was like, shut down graphic packaging. They have to fix their stuff. They need to fix all this malfunctioning equipment. They're like, we're not going to do that. And then like probably a month after that, they gave them the permit.
So I want to make something clear so the audience gets it, because this is a different level of corruption that I didn't know. So the Michigan Economic Council,
Economic Development Council, yep. MEDC.
The MEDC, which is basically just a council of donors. I mean, I've covered it before. It's just wealthy donors, real estate people, chamber of commerce types, but it's an official apparatus of the Michigan government. So the Michigan Economic Development Council gave graphic packaging, you're saying $80 million?
Yeah, it's called, in part of the MEDC, there's something, they don't ever say what it's called. It always says MSF. You have to look at the reports. I look at the reports. I look at everything, all the data, all the details. And it's Michigan Strategic Fund, which is part of MEDC. It's the same thing, really. And so Michigan Strategic Fund, which is part of MEDC, gave them that. Yeah, it says right on their brownfield report. Because graphic packaging also expanded on brownfields that they contaminated over the years.
So basically, Michigan's giving them the money to further pollute Michigan citizens.
But they'll never admit it. I mean, they'll never, I mean, I think that's why they're ignoring it. But as like I told them, I'm going to continue to fight for this. I'm going to continue to fight for everyone. And I'm going to uncover every single step of this corruption. Like she appointed our ex-mayor, Bobby Hopewell, to the MEDC right after he gave graphic packaging permission and as mayor of Kalamazoo to expand the plant. So that's another thing, and then literally within days after he was appointed to MEDC, Marianne Dolehanty, the official who's in charge of air quality over Eagle, gave graphic packaging the permit. And then they had another part of the permit that was given later that year. But to me, it seems like, all the politicians in the city of Kalamazoo, they ignore everyone. David Anderson is our mayor, but he was our vice mayor with Bobby Hopewell before he stepped down to go on to MEDC. And every time people would call in and say, our eyes are burning, our lungs are burning, please help, they wouldn't even say anything. We even had an epidemiologist that wrote a book called The Death Gap from Chicago call in and say, you need to rezone this area because these people have a 14-year death gap. They're dying 14 years premature than they should be. And they didn't even address his comment. I mean, they completely ignore it. Even one of the politicians in Kalamazoo that stepped down, Erin Knott, she said that she could smell the gas at her house. And when she spoke up to the mayor and the rest of the commissioners, they told her to keep quiet about it. And she was like a commissioner.
Some people might say, Jordan, you're overstepping, but there's a lot of talk now. I talked about it earlier. The media is pushing chemical weapons. Putin's going to use chemical weapons, gassing their people, blah, 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 blah. What do you call this? What do you call what's being done in Kalamazoo, what's been done in Kalamazoo, that the Michigan government, with its little business apparatus, is giving this known toxic polluter nearly $100 million to expand and pollute more people. It's not just black people that they're going to pollute. It's going to be poor white people, working class people. What do you call that? A tea party?
Genocide.
I mean, that's, yeah. Because
that's what I call it. Genocide. That's what they don't like it, but ecocide and genocide, it's both. They're very similar. You know, I mean, we have the worst, like one of the worst Superfund sites that graphic packaging is still spilling into the river. Like right now, as you and I are talking, in the wastewater plant. Like one of the reporters like took pictures of the PFAS foam on top of the river like a couple of weeks ago. The PCB mud that somebody almost died in because he got stuck in it trying to fish. I mean, it's just like, it's so toxic. It's like literally I mean, when Erin Brockovich interviewed me, she put like my title is your neighborhood a wasteland, a toxic wasteland? Because that's what to me, it seems like that's what it is, you know? It's all toxic, but there's still, I mean, they should stop it. You can't stop what happened in the past, but you can stop what you're going to do in the future. So why are you allowing this to continue?
Well, what's very interesting to me is the Michigan legislature is Republican. Obviously, Republicans with their little culture war on masks on children. We can't have that. It's tyranny. Democrats now have joined in. We want to take masks off children. You know, in a perfect world, I would love children not to wear masks during.
They should be wearing masks to protect them from the toxic air.
But that's my point. Conservatives are very worried about masks on children during COVID. They don't give a damn, it seems, about the children here inhaling this toxic gas.
Right. Or anywhere. I mean, these it's not just Kalamazoo. These air monitors that have the criteria pollutants turned off, the EPA monitors, they're in rural, white, lower income communities. I mean, they don't even have enough air monitors as it is, but the ones they do have, they should at least have them turned on so you can see what the air quality is in that county.
Right.
And I'm from Cass County, Michigan. I grew up in Dowagiac in a small town, and the air monitors turned off there too. I complained about that. I complained about all of them that I've seen turned off. They have a few criteria pollutants turned off in Detroit and Grand Rapids, but they still don't have them all turned on. And why are they turned off in these other cities? You know what I'm saying? Like, why?
Let me ask you, because you're a bit of a force of nature. I mean, you've done all these things. You're kind of like the Erin Brockovich of Kalamazoo here, and you've moved out of Kalamazoo because of all this. But are the masses there aware of this? Because you said the media is covering it. In my experience with Michigan media, corrupt, in on the cover-ups, literally. I mean, in the case of Flint, I've broken cover up after cover up after cover up, and I've literally been told by some of the reporters there we're not allowed to report on this.
Yeah, me too. I've been told it, or I have a conflict of interest by some of the journalists told me that. I'm like, what?
You have a conflict of interest because you're a citizen inhaling the gas?
A conflict of interest for the journalists to write about the story of what's going on is what they've told me. I've talked to so many different ones. So Time Magazine did something on, like, you know, how everybody's obsession with shopping, you know, and they wrote a little bit about our story in there, but they wrote about other people, that hydrogen sulfide emissions. Like Erin wrote about it, but mostly I have MLive in Kalamazoo. There's a reporter, Brad Devereaux, shout out to Brad. He's been covering this a lot on the local level. And Channel 3 News, they've been covering it. And Detroit covered my civil rights complaint, Detroit Free Press. I don't know if you know about them, but they covered the thing on the sacrifice zones in Michigan a couple of months ago, and Kalamazoo was included in that with Detroit and Flint. So it seems like
they're not following the money, and that's the problem.
Yeah, they're not.
They could cover it. MLive, the Flint Journal, they've done plenty of stories that basically regurgitate whatever the hell the state told them. Detroit Free Press done some stories more critical of the state of Michigan, particularly the state environmental department. But I don't see them following the money. I don't see them pointing out that the state of Michigan's, the fund you were talking about, that's part of the government, is literally giving graphic packaging $80 million. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. And these journalists in Michigan, it's not just Michigan, it's many other places, are basically muzzled not to report on this. and laughably saying to like one of the top activists, probably spending most of your time on this, that you have a conflict of interest because what?
They said they have a conflict of interest, like they can't report on something because of a conflict that their publication had or something with, maybe, I don't know. That's why I said it seems strange that they would even say that to me, so many that I've talked to, because is the conflict with the company? Like, you don't want to upset the company, or do you want to not upset the politicians, or do the politicians pay for your publication? Like, do they sponsor your publication? Like, they never really elaborated on it. So I guess I really don't understand with that.
Next time, record the conversation, because that's scary.
Yeah, well, I started now.
Oh,
That
okay.
was in the beginning when I started doing all this. And I was just like, so I couldn't believe how many people I would talk to. And I was learning as I went on about, getting all these experts to help me, epidemiologists, toxicologists, talking to everyone at the EPA. And, right now, Eagle has went into informal resolution with me on the civil rights complaint to resolve it. And I just had this whole list of everything I want Eagle to change. And I don't know if they're going to listen to everything or not, but I don't think that the complaint can be resolved unless they make some serious changes at that agency. And I was even asked if, I want to put my complaint with the other complaints, because there's just so many filed against that agency right now. And I said that I would not be opposed to that, but I want changes to be made. I mean, ECRCO is supposed to be there to take funding away from Eagle. Like, they're supposed to take them away if they're violating civil rights like this, but they've never done that I've ever seen. And, they say, oh, well, if we do that, we don't want to take funding away from the agency because then things would be worse than they are. But I don't think there could be anything any worse than it already is. And if you don't put down penalties against polluters or penalties against agencies that aren't following the rules, then it's never going to stop. And you have to make people be held accountable for their actions. And that's what I'm about.
The deeper problem, I'm not trying to minimize trying to get reform in the environmental agency, and that goes across the board. But the deeper problem is when the system is corrupt, when the environmental agency is actually their top priority is really economic development rather than public health. And that is the state of Michigan, the federal EPA. They don't say so, but if you talk to EPA officials, which I have, you talk to state environmental whistleblowers, which I have, it's all about how do we help urban renewal, these buzzwords, economic development, economic renewal. So when you could clean house at the agency, but if the state of Michigan is still funding these criminal polluters, if these criminal polluters are then paying back to politicians and political donations, that's the problem. So not to minimize your efforts.
That's why you got to call out the politicians. You got to call out everyone that's involved in this, and people have to stop voting for politicians that care more about profit over people. It should be people over profit. I mean, I don't feel like anybody understands how much like the 1% controls the world, and how they just don't want, the 95% of the rest, 5% of us know really what's going on. And then the other 90% just they don't understand it, or they don't care, or they're just not educated on these issues. And so it's important to educate the public on what's really going on so that they can fight against this too. Because if you're not aware of what's going on, then you're not going to care, you're not even going to think about it. And so I was one of those people that didn't know, that just wasn't aware, was just living my daily life, not even caring about the stuff, thinking, oh, the EPA protects the environmental stuff. Like, we don't get taught about this stuff in school,
or by the media.
Or about the media. Because a lot of people think the media will just, they want clicks too, it's like, and obviously I feel like the media should definitely, they need to start being more transparent. They're just not transparent at all. And I mean, there is no transparency in government, no matter how much you put that on your website or you preach about we're all about being transparent. No, you're not. You're never going to be. You're never going to tell the public what's really going on. It seems like a big, like, it's just a scam to me. It's criminal. It's cruel.
Let me ask you, has this affected your health, family members' health?
Oh my God. Yeah, I have high blood pressure now. I never had that before I started this battle. And I've had PTSD since I was in the military. I worked for Homeland Security after the September 11th attacks, and I have never had as much stress in my life as I have doing this, because you're, like you said, I'm fighting a system here. And there's not enough people that are standing up. I want them to. There are a lot of people that are aware of this too, that just keep their mouths shut about it. I don't know why, because like, to me, it's just so infuriating. Like, I don't want anyone to get sick. I don't want anyone to die. I mean, everyone, just like everyone's so concerned about the Ukraine war, they should be. This is a humanitarian crisis, but so is the environmental issues that are happening in the United States right now. These are also humanitarian crises. These people are being like killed for profits. Like there's nothing. I mean, there's so many things they can do. Like put some damn filters on the smokestacks. Seems so easy. This could have been done long ago. We had these regulations in place since the 70s. They could have done this. I mean,
how about healthcare for the residents of Kalamazoo?
There's no, like, bring in some medical vans. That's what I asked Michigan Department of Health and Human Services do, because I got ATSDR. They're supposed to like put something in this health study about how stress affects environmental contaminated communities, because they interviewed me about it, ATSDR. And I begged CDC to like push MBHHS to do this report faster, you know, and they're supposed to like have like health recommendations in this report. I don't think there's been many studies out there like this with fence line communities next to polluters and health recommendations and recommendations for the polluters, but I asked them to bring in medical vans. We do have a clinic inside of our neighborhood that I'd love to get FOIA requests on those records, because I feel like that's another thing that was put there because they knew about this. I mean, I even was told in the 70s there was high cancer rates over there, and that the plant, when it was under a different name, offered to pay them off, you know, because there's a cancer cluster over there, which makes sense.
Honestly, it's hard for me to move on to other stories, other cities and states, because every time I try to move on to other cities and states, Michigan just reels you back, because it's just crazy. You're talking about bribery, payoffs. I mean, it's you can't make a movie this corrupt. And
yeah, it's scary. It's like to me, I always say that it's like I feel like I'm living in like a horror movie. Like that's, I mean, the more I find out, the more scary it is to me, because I just don't understand why all the cover, and why would people that are trying to cover this up not care about their own families being poisoned?
Right.
That's strange to me.
Right.
Because I mean, if I worked there, I would be like, oh my God, you need to change this. Like, this is crazy. I'd be calling it out, because I wouldn't want my family to be poisoned. I mean, my family got poisoned, and now there's other families still being poisoned. And so I'm like, hello, does anybody know what's going on here? Is anybody going to do anything? Or is everyone just going to keep covering this up and acting like it's not a problem when it's obviously a very, very severe public health crisis?
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.